back to our series on gospel-centered families and relationships. And in this seventh video, we're going to look at the principles of grace and gratitude that are found in Deuteronomy 6. But before I read the text, I want to try the difficult task of defining grace. Grace, simply defined, is receiving favor that is not earned. And while that is simply stated, it's way more complicated than that. We all know that. Grace is messy, it's complicated, it's something that's given, it's something that's received, and when it's given, it's complicated and messy, and when it's received, it's complicated and messy. And so there's no simple way to define grace. There is with words, I guess, but the walking out of that grace is really the principle that we're looking at here in Deuteronomy 6. So we're going to spend a little time in this and trying to wrap our minds a little bit around it. But let's look at this, beginning in verse 10. When the Lord brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, a land with large flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. And when you eat and are satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Notice the grace that's emphasized in the text. Did you hear it? Again, working from the simple definition of grace is receiving favor that wasn't earned. Listen, when the Lord brings you, there was nothing that happened that Israel did to bring themselves out of Egypt. The Lord brought themselves out of Egypt. Go read Exodus, you'll get the whole picture there. Even the wandering around and where they were about to cross into the promised land, they couldn't do it. They crossed the Jordan River at a flood stage during flood season, and they were still able to get across. The Lord brought you out of all that, and the Lord brings you into. Nothing they did, the Lord did it. Grace. To the land he swore to your forefathers. This is God's grace in fulfilling a promise some 400 plus years previous that he did not forget. That's grace. And you live in cities you did not build. Houses filled with goods you did not provide. Drink from wells you did not dig. Harvest from vineyards and groves you did not plant. All of those things they get the blessing from and the favor from, but did nothing to earn it or even deserve it. It was simply given to them because of God's grace. Grace is an essential part of all deep and long-lasting relationships. At some point, we will need to give grace, and at some point, we will all need to receive grace. We see this in our physical families between husbands and wives. If you are in a relationship with a spouse, you understand you need grace sometimes, and you understand you've got to give grace, and that's a good thing. That's the basis of that. If you're a parent, you know you've got to give grace, and you know you're not a perfect parent. I have 3 children, and I am not a perfect parent, and I need to receive grace from them. If you are if you have siblings and you grew up with a brother or sister or cousins, you know in those relationships they're going to have to give grace to each other. Children will have to give grace to their parents. We see this in our forever family relationships. We spend enough time with one another, doing life with one another, living in community, we're going to see some of the character defects that we have. Time with one another in a forever family relationship and with brothers and sisters, while time grows the relationship, there's also going to be plenty of opportunity for people to see and experience our not so great moments in our life. Those need to be met with grace. When someone has a flare-up of anger or says some comments that shouldn't have been made because whatever reason, a bad day or something hit them wrong and some deep-seated trigger is happening they don't even know about, they need grace. When I realize I have crossed a line with somebody and I don't need to, or said some things I shouldn't, I need grace. And when that grace is given, that is a foundation and a seedbed for good relationships to grow out of. Every bit of that is because of what the grace God has given us. Grace also leads to gratitude. Listen to this in verse 13. Fear the Lord your God, serve him only, and take your oaths only in his name. Do not follow other gods, the gods of the people around you. For the Lord your God, who is among you, is a jealous God. Whenever you come into a land that was not yours, and you eat from groves and vineyards that you didn't plant, and drink from wells you didn't dig, and you live in houses you didn't build, and you have all these goods that you didn't provide, don't forget your Lord, the one who provided it. You serve him only. Don't look around to the other gods in the nation around you. You are grateful to him because he is the one that brought you out. Whenever grace is given in relationships, and when grace is received in relationships, it creates this spirit of gratitude for one another. And when we live in this mutually gratuitous dispositions with one another, it is a place where the gospel is the center of it, and that we can grow in gratitude for one another. As we mentioned, the best picture of grace is God's grace shown towards us in Jesus Christ. The basis of giving and receiving grace is because we have received grace from God. I can be gracious to my family. My family can be gracious to me. My friends can be gracious to me. My forever family is gracious to me. And in turn, I am gracious to them. And my family is grateful for me. And I'm grateful for my family. And I'm grateful for my forever family. And there is this mutually respectful, gracious, and gratuitous relationship that we grow in. Why? Because we're such great people? No. Because God is so great and he lives in us. And it is because the gospel is the gospel of grace at the center of who we are, and therefore what comes out of us is gospel-centered families and relationships that live and grow in grace. And that has got to happen. So let's dig in as the Lord guides us in these gospel-centered families and relationships.